it was a huge fight after having had hung out with your friends or your family. And then you ask yourself, was the fight worth it? Because the fights are so brutal. His mood could flip at any given moment. It was scary knowing that he could go from 100% happy to punching walls.
In this edition of In the Shadows, Toxic Love and Domestic Violence, Julia's story.
Welcome to In the Shadows, where we shed light on difficult issues right here in our community. I'm Patty Lemons. In this series, we're talking about toxic love, which by definition means any relationship where one person holds power over the other to the point that it becomes unhealthy. A little over a year ago, I started a new job. On that same day, my coworker Julia started as well. I remember a young, silly, carefree girl walking into the lobby. She certainly wasn't shy, and she looked like she was ready to take on the world. Together we navigated our new careers, helping each other as we became more comfortable. A couple of months in, she started dating and fell in love with a man she was just sure was her soulmate. I could tell she was very happy, and I was happy for her. But a few months later, I noticed a shift in her. She became a little quieter, but I just assumed she was maturing and focusing on her career. She made some comments about how her boyfriend wanted her to grow her hair out, and that he didn't approve of certain things. The mom in me made a mental note, but I didn't mention anything to her about it. None of it seemed worthy of intervention. Then one day she told me that they had broken up. And I was pretty shocked, but the more we talked, the more I realized just how unhealthy the relationship had been. And I've got to say, I'm so proud of her for getting out when she did. So joining me today is Julia. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I kind of gave a brief summary of what I saw from my perspective, but can you take us back to a year ago and tell us how you met your boyfriend?
So actually, I've known him my entire life. And that's what made me comfortable with dating him so quickly and jumping in so quickly. We met through our parents' relationships. My dad grew up with his dad, and I was really close friends with his younger sister growing up. So I had a crush on him and was always aware of him. Both of our parents have conjoined Christmas parties. So I made a move when I was 21. And just thought I'd go for it, and we started dating, and we got really serious really quickly.
I remember you telling me this is the man I'm going to marry.
Yeah.
How did you know that?
Being so young, I think all the feelings that I was feeling was truly for the first time. So I confused the newness of those feelings and the exciting nature of the relationship as true love and as destiny, God's plan, whatever you may call it. And that's probably what led me to jumping in so quickly.
Had you been in serious relationships before?
Most definitely. I had 2 serious relationships in high school, always with older men. Not much older, but every year counts when you're in high school. So I had a few serious relationships under my belt by the time I was pursuing this gentleman.
Did it seem healthy in the beginning?
It was different than any relationship I had been in previously. So for me, it was healthy at the time. I didn't notice any of the signs at the very beginning because there wasn't any.
So how far in did you start noticing things that maybe weren't quite right?
I would say it was within the first couple weeks of dating. It was simple things, and that's how predators prime you. I've learned now, the more that I read on this subject, the more that it becomes clear how unhealthy the relationship was. But he started off by saying certain things about my appearance, and I prided myself on my appearance. I still do. It's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy dressing up, changing my hairstyle frequently, playing with makeup, and little by little he would make comments that were not outright aggressive or mean, but they were the type of comments that you would ask yourself, was that a compliment or an insult? The way that they were phrased. So,
what types of comments?
Things like, he would say certain things that would just kind of rub me the wrong way. And in regards to my makeup, he would say, "You're so beautiful. Why do you cover it all up?" And so you take it as a compliment, but then you realize I put time and money into makeup, and it's something I enjoy doing, or else I wouldn't do it. And slowly it erodes at that concept. So it's not as if he said, "You can't wear makeup." Those words never came out of his mouth, but it was just those side comments initially. And then the comments would become more specifically about my lips. So if I was wearing a bold lipstick color, which I do frequently, he would say, "Who are you trying to impress with that lipstick?" And it just got more and more intense from there. So it got to the point where I just slowly stopped wearing makeup.
So he commented on your appearance. What about like your intellect? Did he mess with that at all?
Not in the beginning at all. We would get into frequent fights about miscommunications that we may have. So, for example, he may engage in gaslighting to undermine my opinions or my perceptions of reality. So he would misquote me or relay information that was completely false and opposite of what I had remembered. What saved me from believing him or thinking that I was crazy was my journal, keeping detailed records of each fight, why it was happening, what we did to resolve the situation. And I would even have him write in my journal. So he would write his take on a situation as well. And looking back at that, you can see all the signs of him controlling situations, half apologizing. A big thing that bothered me, especially in the beginning, was he would say he was sorry, but he would say, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, blah, 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 but." And that but was a big turning point. My mom used to say anything said before the word but is BS. As in, if you say but in the middle of the sentence, everything that you said in the beginning has no merit. You don't actually mean it if you follow it with an excuse. So he would say, "I'm sorry for yelling at you, but you were late from getting home from work. I was worried about you, and you didn't call as soon as you got off." So that "I'm sorry" becomes hard to believe when there's a but in the middle.
So he would get upset if you were late from work?
Most definitely. That was a big deal. He wanted to know where I was at any given moment, specifically where I was and who I was with, why I was there. And in the beginning, you don't notice it. You think that you're in a honeymoon phase and they just care deeply about you and are showing interest in your hobbies and lifestyle. But then it becomes every second him knowing where you are, who you're with, why you're interacting with them, what conversations you may be having. Because not only does he know you're there, he will call you multiple times during the time that you're gone away from him. He'll call you repeatedly. If you don't answer, it's a fight when you get home. So there's no way to avoid it. A big part of his ability to control the situation and to control me was the fact that we lived together, which looking back now was a huge mistake. I shouldn't have moved in with him that quickly. He moved into my house after a few of my roommates moved out. So I looked at the situation as beneficial for both of us. He would no longer have to commute to work, and it would save us both money. And I needed a roommate, and I knew him. I thought I knew him, so I allowed him to move into my house.
So for young girls listening to this, or even more mature girls, I think we've all been in relationships where there's been jealousy and they want to know where you are. What can you say to them so that they realize that's not right? That how should they handle that?
I think that you should ask yourself, to whom are you accountable? Is it to yourself? Is it to your parents? Is it to your friends? Or is it to your partner? And I would argue that you're only accountable to God when you're an adult. I felt accountable to him. I felt that I had to answer to him, and that ultimately he made my decisions. Not because I asked myself, do I need to ask permission to do this? But because I would consider his feelings before my own. And that's not being selfish, to consider your feelings first it's being in control of your life. I would tell the women listening, young women getting into dating especially, and getting into their first serious relationships, to first Google the signs of being in an emotionally abusive or physically abusive relationship. Know the signs before you go in and empower yourself to throw up the red flags, or at least to have a confidant in your life that would throw up those red flags for you.
What are some of the red flags that you noticed?
From what I've learned, the first red flags are regarding your appearance. Men are visual creatures. Women are too, but men more so than women. The first signs, I can only speak to the first signs for me, but the first signs for me were the appearance comments about my appearance, what I was wearing, and then it became invasions of my privacy. So I mentioned that he would write in my journal. I only let him do that because I had caught him many times reading my journal without my permission, reading my Instagram DMs from before we were even together, and holding me accountable for those actions that I had taken before we even were dating. So I would say if you catch the man in your life or the woman in your life violating boundaries that you have set up, especially privacy, I think that would be a huge red flag for you to get out. Because if they violate your privacy, violate your boundaries, they don't respect you. And without respect and trust, you can't form a future together.
So you don't have to answer this if it's too personal, but did you ever do anything that warranted him worrying about your loyalty to him?
Did I ever violate his trust?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not. I was never texting another man inappropriately. I isolated myself from my male friends at work, my golfing buddies, etc.
What about your female friends?
I think I would pick and choose which stories to tell them, because I knew on some level that they were out of hand, and the stories would allude to me not being in control of my life, and I didn't want to admit that someone else had taken over my life. A part of me wanted to prove to my family and my friends that I was a good judge of character, and that I couldn't fall in love with a man who didn't absolutely love me wholeheartedly back. It's hard to admit that kind of defeat. So I think that I would selectively isolate myself from my male friends just because they're male, and I knew that that would elicit jealousy from my ex. But also I probably isolated myself from my female friends by not telling them the whole truth at any given time during the relationship.
So we all want to be respectful to our significant other. I tell my husband where I am. I don't keep anything from him. At what point does that become unhealthy? Because he'll call and ask what I'm doing, but it's not, I don't feel like I'm answering to him. It's just out of respect that I'm going to be late because of this or whatever. So at what point is that not cool?
In my experience, I noticed that the questions became more aggressive in tone, and tone does matter. The way that they're delivered. You know when someone's accusing you of something, even if they're not saying anything accusatory. It's the tone. Instead of, oh, hey, hun, what's up? It's, what are you doing? Where are you? There's a totally different tone behind that, and intention matters. I think in regards to a healthy relationship, it'll feel like they're interested in you. It'll feel like they are interested in knowing how your day is going, or if you've had a rough day and you want to talk about it, they want to be there to support you. Versus an unhealthy relationship, when they ask you, they're accusatory in their tone, and the way that they phrase things will come off as controlling. In regards to my relationship, I knew he was accusing me of something in his line of questioning because my heart would race, much like it is now. And you notice when you're nervous, you notice how you're feeling. And that matters too, because as humans, we pick up on nonverbal communication signs. So if his posture or tone of voice were alluding to possible violence, then I would tense up, my heart rate would increase, and it would feel as if I was in a dark room with a table between us and a light swinging from the ceiling, like I was being interrogated. And looking back in my journal entries, you see me use that word a lot. I felt as if I was being interrogated, not asked. And there is a difference.
So tell me some of those journal entries that shock you today.
I would make lists of things that we were fighting about and how they led to one another. It was never one fight about one subject. It was one fight per day about many subjects. And looking back at those journal entries and just the silliness behind those entries, and you can see my attempt to peacemake throughout the relationship. I was raised to make logical decisions, and that has made me a logical person. Usually I can control a conversation and the way that it's going. With him, the train was always off the tracks. I couldn't control it. No matter how calm I remained, he would get riled throughout the conversation. Then it would turn into yelling. And in my house, the way I was raised, you were only yelled at if you were in big trouble. So I think the inner child in me was scared of him because he yelled at me so frequently.
So you talk about emotional abuse, verbal abuse, any physical abuse?
It depends on what you constitute as physical. He would punch walls. He would slam doors. I grew up with a very peaceful father, so any of those things elicited a fear response in me, which I consider to be physical abuse around me. Toward the end, and as you know, during the breakup, it did become physical, hands on my body, physical. And being a survivor of sexual assault at such a young age, I know what it feels to be physically assaulted. So that made it especially hard, and that was the turning point or breaking point in my psyche and my relationship with him as well.
You mentioned that you were a survivor of sexual assault. You don't have to go into great detail about that, but tell me a little bit about it.
I think to know how the situation affected me, I have to start with how I was raised. I was raised in a Christian household. I'm still Christian to this day. I have a very strong faith. But when I was 16, I held my purity at such a high level that anything that would taint said purity would destroy me. I wanted to date. I knew I was mature for my age, and so I wasn't as scared as I should have been to be hanging around older men. I met a boy online. He was 19 when I was 16, and through a series of unfortunate texts, ended up meeting up with him at his apartment, and he had perfect excuses for his TV in his living room for being broken, and so we had to hang out in his bedroom. And kissing turned to shoving, turned to being held down, not being able to move, screaming and no one could hear. And it just became violent so quickly I didn't know how to react. And what bothers me to this day about portrayals of rape on TV is the girls either blank out and stare at the ceiling, or they black out completely, and that can be some people's experience, just pure shock and not remembering the situation. But in my case, it was not peaceful. I did not blank out. I did not look at the ceiling. It was violent. I was scared, and I was fighting the entire time. Afterwards, he drove me back to my friend's house. I snuck in her window, and I pretended like it never happened. I shoved that way down. And it's amazing how the brain can do that, just to cope, just to get up in the morning and go to high school, and to be president of this and vice president of that. And you have to shove down your feelings and go back to work. So I didn't tell anyone until I opened up to a girls' Bible study in college. And I told my parents with the help of my pastor. And I've been working through healing ever since.
So at this point in your life, that was the only sexual experience you had had?
Yes, I had kissed other boys and held their hands, but that was it.
So how has that affected you today?
I would say that it has affected me to some degree in that I'm very protective of the women in my life, and I am maternal in my instincts. And that was the case before the sexual assault, but that was magnified afterwards because, especially when I was at Mizzou, the University of Missouri, I was very protective of my sorority sisters. I wanted to make sure that what happened to me could not happen to them on my watch. So it's affected me in that degree. I've taken many self-defense courses since this happened. So I would say that my head is on a swivel in every dark parking lot. As far as my romantic relationships, being a survivor of sexual assault has affected my ability to let my guard down during a sexual encounter, consensual or not. It's a very soft target for me, meaning that someone could easily manipulate the situation with sex. I feel like I'm more prone to it. But I'm also more aware of what it feels like when consent is taken away, because I know what it's like to have a non-consensual encounter. So when I feel as if I'm not in control of a situation, I can put a stop to it now before it gets to the point of sexual assault.
Do you feel like that experience helped you realize what was going on in your relationship and helped you to see that I don't need this in my life. I'm better than this. Did it help you?
I would say that I gained strength through confiding in friends and family about being sexually assaulted, and that empowered me to eventually confide in my friends and family about my emotionally abusive relationship, and they helped me get out. If my friends and coworkers had not talked me through it, I don't think I ever would have left him. I think I would be engaged to be married to him at this point. So yes, I believe that my sexual assault happening and subsequent telling my family about the sexual assault empowered me to get out of my unhealthy relationship. I don't think that the two events are necessarily correlated in any other way than me having the strength to tell my parents what happened, knowing what it would do, and having the strength to tell my parents about the emotionally abusive relationship. Their support throughout my healing of the sexual assault let me know that they would be there for me anytime I needed them.
What was their reaction to all of this? You said they were family friends.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have that conversation with them?
My parents could tell, just like you had mentioned, that my demeanor had changed. He isolated me from them. I wasn't allowed to see them nearly as often as I would have liked to. So my parents are smart, and they picked up on those signs, but they didn't know the extent until I confessed to them what truly had been going on. His father was friends with my father, but that was his stepfather. My ex, his dad died when he was very young, and that put a hole in his heart and a distrust for people in his life because he felt abandoned. So when he came into my dad's friend's life, my dad witnessed his relationship with his stepfather more than anyone, and they saw him grow up in a high-pressure, frequent yelling household. He was never good enough for his parents, specifically his stepfather, and he felt as if he had to earn love. So it wasn't surprising to them that he struggled with alcohol abuse, struggled with partying, and struggled to find himself and his self-worth. Ultimately, hurt people, and he was a hurt little boy that just needed love.
You sound like you have compassion for him. How can you have compassion after everything that he put you through?
I don't think he ever had intentions of truly hurting me. Everything he said was out of concern for our relationship, for him, his worthiness, and for me. I think he truly thinks to this day that he was trying to help me. And if that meant wearing less makeup so I wouldn't be perceived to be promiscuous, or showing less cleavage so I wouldn't be perceived to be asking for it, wearing my hair in a certain way that was naturally more feminine and less intimidating, less sexual in his eyes. In his eyes, he was protecting me more than anything. So that's how I can have compassion for him. I understand his background. I understand where he came from. I know the hurt that he feels. And I have a deep belief that he will get help, professional help, help from friends, help from the world. And I believe that when he becomes more confident in himself, who he is, and who his creator is, he will be healed from needing to control situations and needing to control people. So I'll always have compassion for him. I did love him.
Do you feel like he loved you?
In his own way, I believe that he loved me. But
There's that but.
yeah, I would say that it was an unhealthy love from the beginning. It wasn't true love. True love is trust. And he would tell me over and over throughout our relationship that he did not trust me, and that, quote, "I know you have cheated on me at least once." But he wouldn't say things like that at the beginning. He worked his way up to that, intentionally or unintentionally. We brought out the worst in each other, and that's not love. Love is bringing out the best in one another, working as a team, and making each other better, making the world better.
I'm going to go through some of the warning signs for abuse, and we can just kind of stop if there's one that that you have examples of that you can share. But I Googled, of course, the information, and one of the symptoms is controlling your time, space, money, thoughts, and what you wore. Now, obviously, you already covered that was a big one for you.
What I wear is very important to me. I love clothes, always have. I was voted best dressed 2016. Whoop. And I hold pride in how I present myself to the world. So if someone is trying to control that, they're trying to control who I am and my expression thereof.
Monitoring where you go and your money. You said he did monitor where you went. What about the money part of it?
In regards to money, he always owed me money. So if anything, I was controlling the money. I made more money than him, and I made better financial decisions than he did. So I was often lending him money.
You said he did isolate you by not letting you see or talk to others. You said he isolated you from your male friends, even your parents.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. You don't realize that you're being isolated until you take a step back and look at, when was the last time I hung out with my friends? And it turns into weeks and months of you not seeing your friends. At no point did he say you're not allowed to have friends, you're not allowed to see your family. It wasn't as cut and dry as the Lifetime movies make it. It was a huge fight after having hung out with your friends or your family. And then you ask yourself, was the fight worth it? Was hanging out with my friends worth the fight? And the answer is usually no, because the fights are so brutal.
Accusing you of flirting or having affairs.
Most definitely. I was accused of having an affair weekly. Like I said, he would go through past messages on my phone. I'm an attractive young woman, so I get many inquiries via social media as to my availability. It's a nice way of putting it. So he would look back through these and ask me the nature of my relationship with these men whom I've never met before or had a very surface level relationship with through work or school or anything. And he would want to know how I knew them, when I knew them, when was the last time I saw them, what was the nature of our relationship. He would use past relationships against me no matter how tiny and insignificant the relationship. And he used my past, what he would deem promiscuity, as reason to not trust me in the present, even though I had never cheated on him. I had never flirted with another man. I had never pursued another man other than him. I only wanted him.
Getting angry or resentful when you're successful. Did he ever do that?
A comment that he would often make was I didn't have enough friends, which is ironic because he would isolate me from my friends indirectly. So if I made a successful new relationship at work, he would be the first to speak ill of that person, to make up scenarios or situations that would make me look at them in a different light. So I view new friendships and new connections between humans as little successes. And he would diminish those victories in my life. I was happy that I was building a friend group around me that I could trust and depend on and confide in. But if I mentioned that I had told a friend anything to do with our relationship, he would have words to say about that. So I believe that he undermined my accomplishments by undermining my friendships.
You said that he did intimidate you by breaking things out of anger, punching walls, that type of thing. Did he ever threaten to hurt you or your pets?
He never threatened me with words, only actions. Frequent storming around the house, slamming doors, as you've mentioned, cabinets, breaking things that I loved. That's how he showed his control over a situation. He never threatened my safety, no. My safety was one of his top priorities, I would believe. He wanted to keep me safe. More than anything, he just went about it in wrong ways.
Did he ever threaten to hurt himself?
He would make risky decisions and take risky actions after we had fought and he felt as if he had lost a fight or hurt me. He would drink and drive. So I believe that that's hurting yourself to a certain degree physically, putting yourself in a risky situation. It's not necessarily suicidal, but it's not something a secure person does. So he would drink and drive frequently.
Was he ever demeaning with you with frequent put-downs?
I think the way that he put me down was trying to make me feel as if I was misremembering situations and telling me that I was being controlling. That was a frequent conversation that we would have. So it's some form of psychological defense mechanism that we all can partake in as humans. If there's something we're very insecure about, being controlling in this case, we will accuse our partner of being exactly that, or a friend or an enemy even, of being something that we hate in ourselves. So I think that he accused me of being controlling because on some level he knew that he was being controlling.
Did he ever say things that were designed to make you feel stupid?
I don't think that he intentionally wanted me to feel stupid or wasn't making me feel inadequate in any way. I think that he would use gaslighting as a tactic to get what he wanted in that moment. And as a consequence, my ability to reason was called into question. And that's on me and my evaluation of the situation. I don't think that he intentionally made me feel stupid. I think I felt stupid as a consequence of the way I process a situation. So I think there's a correlation there, but I don't think that there's a causation.
You mentioned that, I'm sorry, but was he always right and didn't apologize? You mentioned that a little bit, but
I would question the integrity of his words when he was apologizing because he would use words like but in the middle of his apology. He would never take 100% fault for a situation, no matter what it was.
Punishing you by refusing to talk or withholding affection?
I think that he punished me by forcing affection. And by affection, I mean his presence in my space. I think that he punished me by invading my space frequently. I slept separately from my ex in our house because I suffer with a chronic illness that makes it hard for me to fall asleep next to someone. I'm in pain all night long, so I needed my own space. That was important for my healing each night and my ability to perform my job duties the next day at work. He would frequently invade my bedroom. There were no locks. I would put a chair underneath the doorknob and force it shut, thinking he would take the hint, but he would barge through. He was a strong, athletic man, so nothing I could do could stop him from invading my presence. So I believe that he punished me with affection.
So this probably doesn't pertain to you, but withholding essential resources like food and money. Like I've learned that A lot of times men will say, "Oh, you don't need to work. You can stay home and you can take care of the kids," as a way to control all the financial resources. But it doesn't sound like that was the situation with you guys.
He was financially dependent on me, so it was hard for him to have complete control over my life. Work was a basis for a lot of our fights, though. So,
was he jealous of your successful career?
I would say so, being that he is almost a decade older than me. I would say there's some jealousy there. He was let go from one of his jobs while we were dating, and I got him a job elsewhere. Being someone who dropped out of college and jumped into her career, I think there was some animosity there for sure, that I was making more money than him. That's emasculating for him.
Did he have frequent mood swings?
His mood could flip at any given moment. It was scary, knowing that he could go from 100% happy to punching walls at any given moment. And it was for the silliest things. Me posting a selfie with a friend was deemed me trying to get attention from the opposite sex. So I stopped posting selfies with my friends. I stopped messaging my friends. It wasn't worth the fight. It wasn't worth the mood swing. And it didn't matter where we were or what event we were going to. His mood was not at all controlled. He could start screaming at me while he was driving a car, increase his speed, and put me in danger and hold me captive in the car. So I'd have to listen to his screaming, no matter how loud. And we could be on our way to a family event. The more pressure there was on an event and it going well and a good impression being made, the more likely we were to fight right before the situation, because his emotions were so high and his ability to control his emotions and anxiety was low.
So when we would hang out after work, go downtown or something, were there issues around that?
I would have to give him weeks' notice to mentally prepare for me going out with my friends. I would have to let him know exactly who was going to be there. If he hadn't met the person, it would be a lot more difficult for him to agree to let me go. I would have to prime him, basically, for an event. And we would have many, many, many fights about the event leading up to it. And he would call me during the event multiple times to touch base. And he expected to be invited to all of these events. I was happy to have him along to show him that I was trustworthy. For him to spend time with my friends was important to me because I valued him in my life. I valued my friends in my life. But, there's that but. He would often shut down socially at these events when I would bring him. He wouldn't talk to anyone, and he would want to be the first to leave. So I stopped getting him invites, and I stopped going and stopped hanging out with my friends. The whole relationship was exhausting. I could not rest emotionally. It was draining. And I think that's the reason you saw my demeanor change at work, because I was just out of energy completely. That reminds me, total side note, but this is important because I just realized this. I had a rough day the other day, went home, went to bed at like 8:30. It was amazing. And I thought, wow, why was that so great? Well, because for almost a year, I didn't get to pick what time I went to bed. And looking back at that now, sounds ridiculous. And he never said your bedtime is 10:30, but he would negotiate and manipulate the situation to where I had to ask him permission to go to bed.
So I know you mentioned that you had a chronic illness, and over the past year, I've watched you sit on a blow-up ball chair or whatever it is and do all these things to try to help you feel better. Has the stress of the relationship made you feel a little better?
My pain, here's the kicker of the whole situation. My pain got better. The more I fell in love with him, the more my pain became something that was on the back burner. It was something I couldn't address because I didn't have the time to address it, didn't have time to think about it, because I was fighting with my boyfriend 100% of the time. So actually my pain got better the more that I fell in love with him, and that made it scary to leave him Would that pain come rushing back because of increased stress in my life? Well, I thought it might, but it didn't. It definitely didn't. And I've felt so much happier since I left him. I felt so much more peace. I'm able to rest more frequently when I'm needing to. And that's helped my body heal more than anything. It's just being able to go to sleep when I want.
Seems like such a simple thing.
Oh, freedom.
Anything that he had going on in his life, was it always somebody else's fault?
Yes, absolutely. In situations where it was obvious to me that he was the one at fault, he would place blame on the other party. When he was fired from his job, he placed blame on everyone else in that work environment, which is illogical. You're the only common denominator between all the jobs. So something's wrong with you, not with your employer or your fellow employees. So yes, he would shift the blame to other parties frequently, whether that was me, the way he was raised, or my family members, anything to not admit fault himself, because that would mean addressing the monster behind the mirror. He knew my soft spots were my mother and my father. I love them deeply. Their approval means the world to me. They are the reason that I'm here, first and foremost. And he would compare me to my mother and or my father in a mean way. He would shift the blame to my parents for how I was behaving and made me love them a little bit less, which is the worst part of it all.
Acting like their behavior is no big deal.
Yeah. He would be very dismissive about huge invasions of privacy, because if I was truthful, why would I want to hide my phone? Why would I want to hide my journal? Why would I want to hide my bedroom? Why would I want to shower alone? That was a big one. Why would I want to sleep alone? If I have nothing to hide, why wouldn't I want to share every single second with him of my experience?
Did he ever use religious beliefs to justify holding a dominant position over you?
My faith is the most important thing to me. So oftentimes he would diminish my faith or my ability to interpret God and the world around me. It seems silly, but I prayed for signs from God, whether or not he was the one or whether or not to get out of this relationship. And there were signs right away. We would visit different churches because he didn't like any church that I would pick, probably because it caused him to look himself in the mirror, and he didn't want to do that. It's hard. Introspection is hard, I will admit that, but it is also so freeing to admit that you're a human who has flaws and you're working on it. So I love church in that regard. It helps me. We were at a new church and I loved it, and I had been praying for God to give me a sign to give up on this relationship, to run home to my parents. And my favorite song came on the radio. It's Newsboys. It's old. It was out when I was in middle school. And it's a creed of what we believe as Christians. It's very matter of fact. It's to the point, and it's called We Believe. It came on the radio as soon as we left the church. Keep in mind, he had been pouting the entire time we were at this church with his arms crossed. He was not happy, no matter what the church was saying. When the song came on, I cranked up the radio and he turned it off and he said, "Wow, why would you listen to that? It's so cheesy." That's the foundation of what I believe about the world, what I believe about my God. And you just said it was cheesy. And it was that week I broke up with him. So, in summary, would he use religion to control me? No. Would he use my beliefs as a way of making me feel silly? Yes.
Did he ever ask you not to repeat something that had happened or to keep it? I mean, you mentioned that he was upset that maybe you were sharing some things with work friends. Did he ever blatantly say, don't tell anybody about that?
No. He would never tell me the rules. He would let me know if I had broken a rule. So he never said, you can't tell so-and-so about this situation. But if I told so-and-so about another situation and I came home and we had a huge fight about it, I knew not to do that next time. In that way, predators condition you. They don't tell you the rules ahead of time. You don't know what game you're playing. they tell you once you've broken a rule and you can't go back.
So you've labeled him as a predator in your mind. Explain that.
I said earlier that hurt people hurt people. I believe that all humans have good in them. And I believe that we all struggle with certain bad parts of our humanity. When the bad outweighs the good, you can become a predator. So yes, I believe that he had predatory behaviors. And I pray that he's working through those now.
Did you think that you could save him?
Yes. I believed with my whole heart that I could save him. I believed that I could fix him. I could show him what true love was, and I could show him that he was worthy of it. As a Christian, we're often taught to love all humans, no matter how much it hurts. You are to forgive, you are to move on, and you are to love them because God loves them. But God doesn't want you to suffer. He wants you to be in a healthy relationship with him, with your family, with your friends, and with your significant other. He wants only good for you. So if you feel that you are stuck in a situation and you feel that it is the unchristian thing to do to get yourself out of an unhappy situation, I would say that God wants you to get out. Thinking that I could save him is what kept me in that relationship. He would often say things like, "You're my only source of happiness. You're the reason I get up in the morning. I love you with my whole heart." And there was that pressure there that if I did leave him, would he hurt himself? And I just learned this weekend that he did. He hurt himself by drinking and driving the week we broke up. And I broke down crying. And it's been months since we broke up, but I broke down crying because I truly thought that his family would get him the help that he needs and that he would stop making these horrible decisions and get help. So it was very hard to learn that he hasn't gotten help yet, that he is still in distress, and that he's still just a little boy looking for love. That will always hurt me.
For the women out there who are married and they found themselves in this type of relationship, when you marry somebody, it's for better or for worse. Where is that line? You should be loyal to your spouse. You should help them get through this situation. You should help them grow as a better person. But you can only do so much if they're broken. What do you say to women who are 40 years old? You've learned a lot in your young age. What would you say to them to encourage them that this isn't right, that they don't have to live this way?
I was taught in 7th grade at Springfield Lutheran in my catechism class that there are 3 reasons why you should get out of a marriage: abuse, abandonment, and adultery. The 3 A's. Emotional abuse is abuse. If you feel like a victim, most likely you're a victim. I would tell these women who feel stuck in their marriage to ask themselves if they can live with this amount of happiness, this amount of joy in their life for the rest of their life. It will not get better. He will not change, short of a miracle from God. I would tell these women to Google the signs of being in an emotionally abusive relationship and print it off, compare it to your journal, and know the signs. If that's the case, there are people in your life that care about you and want to help you get out.
When you did decide to leave, did you realize at that point just how far it had gone?
Confiding in my parents was the turning point. I had to disobey him and defy him to spend a day with my parents at the lake. When I did so, I told them everything that had been going on, back to back. When you look at it from a bird's eye view, it's hard to see the patterns, but if you talk about every single fight that you've had, you see the patterns and you notice the consistency of the relationship and how it hasn't gotten better, it's only gotten worse. So I realized that I needed to get out by telling my story.
Were they mad at him?
I think when anyone feels like a victim, feels victimized, they want someone to agree with them and to justify their feelings. My mother is a very strong and passionate woman. She was mad. She was angry. My father works in the medical field, so he is very good at controlling his emotions and keeping them behind a closed door. I believe that he was angry, but he also knows my ex and is very close with his stepfather. So, of course, my dad had different skin in the game than my mom. My mom was angry, my dad was calm. I needed both to get through the situation. I needed the calm, logical father, and I needed the mom with the passion and the love to get me through the situation.
So when you're at that point, you're then accountable to them. If you don't leave, you're accountable to your parents.
Absolutely. And that, you know how your parents are going to react before they react. Your parents know you, and you know your parents better than anyone on this planet. So I intentionally did not tell my parents about certain fights and altercations that happened because I knew subconsciously that they would want me to get out. And then at that point, I would have to get out. At some point, I was ready to leave before telling my parents.
So how are you now?
I am very well. Very well. I love my job. I love my friends. I love my God. And I love my life. I've been very fortunate to find a very secure man. I asked myself after I became single again if there was something wrong with me and if I was worthy of love and affection and true devotion. And through many conversations with my girlfriends, I restored my confidence in who I was. And it was a light switch that many of my friends at work noticed especially. I would get messages at work saying, I have never seen you happier. And this was when I was more single than I had ever been. And the right man came into my life at the right time. And I'm with him now, and it is nothing like how I felt in my past relationship. There is no commonalities. He loves me. And it's true love. It's not toxic love. It's not love with conditions. It's serving each other, loving each other, and being the best teammate that you can be. I'm allowed to find that in my friendships. I'm allowed to find that in my family. And now I'm blessed to have found that in a romantic partner as well.
So a lot of people might not even know what that looks like. They think that sacrificing, that that's the way of life. What is it like to be in a healthy relationship?
You should feel more yourself than you have ever felt when you're in affirming relationships, whether that's in a friendship, a relationship with your family, or with a romantic partner. I feel more myself than I ever have. I feel more in tune with who I'm called to be than I ever have. For me, being in a healthy relationship looks like being a team and being equal. I have complete control over what I do, where I spend my time, what time I go to bed, what I eat, how I dress. I am in control of my life. My partner never tells me what to do. The reason I know that my partner and I are in a healthy relationship is he can tell me when I am in the wrong without hurting my feelings. I've never had that before from anyone in my life. When he calls me out on being silly, I see my silliness. I apologize sincerely. And I know that he's trying to help me. He's not trying to put me down. And I can call him on his silliness. He will admit to his silliness and make an apology as well. And not one with a big fat butt in the middle.
What about the passion or the excitement, or are there a lot of ups and downs right now, or has it kind of leveled out?
My relationship with him has leveled out. We're past the honeymoon phase and happy to be. In the beginning, when you're first getting to know someone, you text them a lot. That's a clear sign that you're first getting to know another person because you have so many questions. We've had hours where all we did was ask each other personal questions and talk about our past and our present and what we want in our future. So we don't text all the time, and it's amazing. I love not texting all the time. You see, with my ex, we texted all the time, and it continued into the extent of their relationship. The constant line of communication never ended. And to me, that means that there's no trust. They can't trust that you're making good decisions if they aren't talking to you at any given moment. With my partner now, I can go an entire day without texting him or calling him. He knows I'm okay. He trusts that I am an adult that can make her own decisions and maintain her own safety and well-being.
And you don't feel like he's indifferent to the relationship?
Absolutely not. If anything, he respects boundaries, and that in and of itself is a sign of love. He knows that working hard and devoting my time at work to doing a good job is important to me. He knows that's something I value. So I believe that he chooses not to text me while I'm at work because he values what I value.
Is there anything else that you want to share with somebody who has found themselves in this situation? Specifically, my question for you would be for young people.
Mm-hmm. If the audience takes away one thing, I want them to know that they are special. They are worthy of true love. They are not less worthy if they are single. You are more than enough for this world, for your friends, and for your family. You do not need to be in a relationship. It does not make you less than to be single. You will be okay. You can make all sorts of friends, and the right person will pursue you at the right time. I would let them know to call someone. It's hard to have these conversations face to face. I would suggest even something simple like taking a screenshot of how your boyfriend or girlfriend is texting you and send it to a friend that you know cares about you and your joy. Just by sending them a screenshot, an example of the toxic behavior, they will call it out. They will advocate for you, and that will give you strength to tell your story to more people and to find a way out of your relationship. Even if there are kids involved, you owe it to yourself to be happy so that you can help bring your kids happiness. Your kids deserve to be in a loving household. So for their sake and for your sake, choose a path that leads you to happiness, not more turmoil.
What do you say to the 16-year-old who is just sure their parents aren't going to understand? And the parents might not understand. Not all parents have that compassion, but I would venture to guess that a lot of them have a lot more than we give them credit for. What would you say to them?
If you're fortunate to have parents in your life that are an active part of your life, they want what's best for you. I would tell you as a young girl to look at your parents' relationship and how they love each other, how your parents love you, how your brothers and sisters love you. Is that the same kind of love that you're getting from your significant other? Is it something that makes you feel more like yourself? Or is it something that makes you feel sorry for being yourself? If it's the latter, you need to rely on your family, rely on your friends, rely on your teachers even. Your teachers love you. They would not scrape by with little to no salary if they did not care about you deeply. Tell a teacher, tell a counselor, just tell someone. We're humans. We crave community. That's never going to change. You're not going to be alone, but it is your job to reach out and to ask for help. Chances are they're just waiting to help you, and they're waiting for the okay that you're ready for help. You can call a hotline. You can call an aunt you haven't talked to since you were young. You can call anyone. And you may be surprised to learn that they've gone through the same thing. In varying degrees, we've all been in a toxic relationship with someone of authority, with a friend, or with a significant other. We are humans, and we suck at a lot of things. So I would tell the 16-year-old girl listening that you are not alone, and that it helps to hear that you're not alone from someone that you trust in your life. I didn't know my mom was in a toxic relationship until I told her about mine. No matter how strong you are as a woman, this can happen to you. You can find yourself in a relationship that is toxic, that is controlling, that is emotionally and physically abusive. It can happen to the strongest of women. It happens step by step, little by little. It is a psychological ramification of these actions. It is not your fault. It does not affect your strength or your validity as a woman to admit that you are in a bad relationship and that you need help getting out.
I think we can all agree that Julia is a very mature and grounded 21-year-old. I wish I'd had a fraction of her insight when I was that age. I have no doubt that she's going to be successful personally, spiritually, and professionally. If you're currently in an unhealthy relationship and need help, please reach out to a friend or family member for support. Or you can call the Harmony House at 417-864-7233 or toll free at 1-800-831-6863. Thank you for joining me for this episode of In the Shadows. You can visit intheshadowspod.com for more episodes about toxic love, as well as other topics related to mental health.